Welcome to the Arsaholics podcast. We are going to be talking about the Man United game coming up, and we are still buzzing after the Tottenham game just gone. You've got me, Raj, here, and Myz. Hello, Myz. You right, mate? You're on mute. It's fantastic. Can't lip read.
Bad start. Sorry, mate. I am good. I am good. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. Looking forward to talking about this game because, yeah, as much as I'm still buzzing after that Tottenham win, I'm sure you still are. It's a massive, massive game this weekend. Massive game against United. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we've played, I think, the same amount of games. And our seasons have seemed very, very different. It feels like, Arsenal have had this very positive trajectory right from the start. It's been the same thing. Even when we've dropped points in only 3 games this season, but every time we've dropped points, we've come back the next game and won. Man United, started the season so poorly. I think they got battered in their first game, didn't they? They got battered against Brentford. And quietly sort of seem to have been going about their business and have suddenly crept into a position which is quite scary because they are 4th on the table now with 38 points. So look, 9 points behind Arsenal, which is still quite a lot. But they've won 5 games in a row. And in fact, I don't know if they've won more than that. It's just that in front of me, I can only see the last 5 games form. But they are the form team. Fine. We've won 4 out of our last 5, so it's not like we're doing badly either. But yeah, they've won their last 5. They've got 38 points. They've been interesting, I suppose. Like recently, fair enough. Most of their games recently have been against teams who I think are in the bottom 6 or 7, but they did just beat the team that everyone thinks is. Everyone, until at least very recently, if not still, think is going to win the league in Man City. Man City were a goal up at Old Trafford and then ended up losing 2-1. What have you thought about Man City, about Man United recently, Myz? Do you think that they could contend for the title?
I think I think a lot of Man United fans are looking at the game on Sunday as the next 2 games, because they've got Palace tomorrow, I believe, and then us on Sunday. And I think they're looking at those 2 games, 2 tough away games. And if they can get 6 points out of those, then of course, I don't think you can discount them from potentially challenging for the title. Sorry, I mean, I do feel like you say, they've kind of very quietly gone about picking up results. As you say, they are the form team, but what we've done so far this season has been quite literally over almost literally over half a season, right? Very, very consistent, very, very consistent form and consistent results. And yeah, they beat City on Saturday, and that was a fantastic win for them. But I mean, if you break that game, I didn't watch the game, to be fair, but if you break that game down a little bit, there's the offside goal. Well, offside, not offside goal. Yeah. Arguably, what happens if that goal does get disallowed? And I think they also played City at a time where it's probably the best time you could play City at any point in a season. When you think about Man City, there's never a good time to play them. But if you're ever going to play them, like this season, now would be the time, kind of thing. They've not been on it since the World Cup, really. So yes, points, wins and points is what kind of does the talking at the end of the day. But I also feel like the game on Sunday, get the next couple of games for them, Palace, I mean, they might go and beat Palace, but the game on Sunday really is a test for them. And it's also it's a test for Arsenal, because like you say, informed team, Arsenal Man United is always a huge game. And that's what's going to be really interesting to see how that game pans out. But I think, to answer your question, yes, they can challenge for the title, because I think United historically and really always have been a team that have had fantastic players. There's never been a United team, even since Sir Alex, where you've kind of gone through their squad, and yes, they have, they've maybe bought some duds and certain purchases haven't worked out, but ultimately they've always spent money. They've always bought some of the best players in the world. And now when you look at the fact that these players are doing really well, you're like, bloody hell, Casemiro, like world-class central midfielder, Rashford, like one of the best attackers in the league at the moment. You know, Bruno Fernandes is back on form. You know, I could go through the team, and you know, Fred's doing a great job, right? And there's players that they can bring off the bench, and this is the other really interesting thing that I went to the game on Sunday with my cousin John again. We were sort of talking about United, and he was really, really, really worried about United. You know, he was like, they're going to come good. He was really worried about the game on Sunday, as in the United game on Sunday, but he was just in general worried about what United are going to do this season and potentially kind of them closing the gap on us. And one of the main reasons for him feeling that, was there's just their squad and their bench and who they can call upon. So in the games where, you know, it's not really going to plan or they need to change it up, they have the options off the bench. They genuinely have some fantastic, like when you think like Anthony doesn't play every game, or I know Sancho's like, I don't even know if he's in the squads at the moment, but you know, he doesn't really play. Maguire doesn't play. You know, when they get to the kind of business end of the season, when injuries start kicking in and suspensions and everything, and you know, players are tired, they do have really good options. So that, and he sort of thinks that might be a deciding factor in not necessarily why they might overtake us, but why they might come really good come the end of the season or this next kind of few months. So, yeah, man, I don't think you can discount them, and I think, you know, we keep, you know, it's, again, like we've said it so many times, it's still so early. Like, you know, it's not, but it is, because there's so many points left to play for. You know, it's probably like 60 or so points to play for, whatever it is, and that means that like things can change dramatically from between now and the end of the season. So I think you have to include Man United in it, and I think you have to include, you know, there's probably Newcastle and obviously Man City in that conversation as well.
Yeah, the scary thing for me about Man United, as much as the things that you've said, is that they've played Man City twice already.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
So if you scan through Man United's fixtures, they don't really have a difficult period. Like Premier League wise, there's no clumping of difficult fixtures together. There is the odd difficult fixture, but it's not clumped together. So, for example, you know, they've got, it's funny because they play Palace away next, and then they play us, which is obviously hard. Away at Arsenal's very hard. But the next game after that, they're at home to Palace. So they've actually got Palace twice in 3 games in the league.
Yeah.
And then, you know, away at Leeds, they should win that. Home at Leicester, they should win that. Home at Brentford, I mean, that might be tricky because Brentford are okay, but you'd still think Man United will win that. You know, then they're away at Liverpool. You could say that's tricky, but then the next game they're at home at Southampton. You know, do you know what I mean? So, even then, when you go towards the back end of the season, right towards the end of the season, they actually end the season like quite well. Their last 4 games are West Ham away, Wolves at home, Bournemouth away, and Fulham at home. Okay, some of those, I'm probably not doing justice to some of those teams. Teams like Fulham are actually doing very well in the league. And, you know, a lot can change as well between now and the end of the season. But I think what concerns me is probably that overall. It doesn't look like on paper that they've got a tough period. Like you say, they have got a squad. It did dawn on me, you know, the other day, you made a good point about Anthony. That's so true. Like he doesn't play. I still don't know whether I think he's any good or not. Like he probably seems okay. But like you say, it's a €100 million player or whatever that he is on the bench. Sancho, like you say, I think, you know, he's not, I think he's got his own fitness issues, etc. So, but you know, he'll be around, and then they've got some decent young players. But you know, as a side point, you also sort of, I think, touched upon something. It's not that this isn't a team that's overachieving. It's a team that's probably just achieving what it probably should at the moment. You know, this is a £1.3 billion squad or whatever it is. It's doing what it should do. But this weekend's going to be seriously interesting, I think, Myz, because it's both teams are buzzing. Both teams have just beaten their biggest rivals.
Yeah.
You know, both teams probably feel like destiny is calling, you know, in some way. Man United probably feel like, you know what, no one's really talking about us winning the title, but it's not that far off, etc. They're probably thinking that. Arsenal are probably thinking that if they play their game, they beat anyone in the world right now. That's probably how Arsenal feel. And when Arsenal are at the Emirates, it's, you know, it's just brilliant. And I can't see United setting up how Newcastle did. But how can you see the game shaping up in that respect, Myz?
No, I agree. I can't see them setting up how Newcastle did for sure. I mean, look, when you think about the game that we played when they beat us at Old Trafford, albeit quite relatively early on in the season, and we've dissected that game. We played well, but we were just very naive, and we got hit on the counter. So I think if you're Arsenal, if you're Mikel Arteta, we know how devastating United can be on the counter attack. Like, they do have some seriously rapid and dangerous players. And Rashford's just in unbelievable form. Well, I say unbelievable form. He's doing really, really well at the moment. And obviously, he's just like come back from the World Cup and he's sort of on fire. And I think that's the thing. That's one of the things that we just need to be really aware of as Man United's threat. I'm not saying they don't have any other threats or they're kind of like they've only got one dimension. I'm not saying that at all. But I think based on the experience we had at Old Trafford, we got hit on the counter a couple of times, like sucker punched almost. And that's what cost us the game. And I think we need to go into this game with a bit more nous and just being a bit more kind of streetwise and aware that is potentially how United could really hurt us. I think the other thing that's going to be really interesting to see, is the midfield battle, because I said, I didn't watch the game, the United City game, but I think Casemiro and Fred both started. I could be wrong on that.
With Eriksen, yeah.
With Eriksen. And apparently Fred had a really, really good game. And I guess if you think about how if you're Man United and you come into this game, you're like, right, who do we need to stop? Who do we need to stop getting onto the ball away at Arsenal? You probably say it's Martin Odegaard. You probably say he's the guy that's dictating everything at the moment. Everything's going through him. And you saw it against Spurs, for example, the goal, they just didn't close him down. And 20, 25 yard shot, sometimes that doesn't go in, but ultimately there was no one pressing him. And I can't see United allowing that to happen as much. So I can see them letting us have the ball, letting our defenders have the ball, even letting Thomas Partey have the ball to a certain extent. I'm not sure they necessarily press really, really hard on Thomas Partey, and especially as he can beat the press really well. But I think as soon as it gets into, the likes of Odegaard, maybe even Xhaka, I think you're going to have Fred just doing what he does pretty well, which is just being a really kind of annoying, just always there in your face, making tackles, and doing that job defensively. And then Casemiro as well, who's obviously been really, really good since he joined. So that's going to be really, really, really interesting to see. Do we maybe not set up slightly differently, but how do we essentially overcome that? I would probably assume that Casemiro and Fred both start again. Interestingly, I don't know if you know this, but obviously they've got Palace tomorrow, and both Casemiro and Fred are on yellow cards. So if they get booked, either of them, they miss the game against us. So
do they? Is it not so? Okay, I thought it reset. I thought it reset the next game or the game after.
It resets on 19 games, but tomorrow's the 19th game. So they have to have played the 19th game.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Really interesting. Yeah. I mean, look, clutching at straws a little bit, but, it wouldn't be the worst thing if one or both of those are out. So, yeah.
I think the Palace game in between is probably quite an important factor in our game, right? For that reason that's a really important reason, but even ignore that for a second. Look, Palace have been pretty crap recently. I say this, I feel Palace are my second team. They're relatively local to me. And, I do really like Palace, Patrick Vieira, all the rest of it. So it pains me to say the fact that they've been really, really poor. And, I've got friends. My best friend is a Palace fan. And I feel the pain that he goes through. Really, I can really feel it. I think it's a really tough time for a lot of Palace fans. But they weren't bad against Chelsea away. I know Chelsea are random, but Palace weren't bad, and they had decent chances. And Kepa had a really good game. So, on that basis, maybe there's a little bit of belief. They're at home. Man United have just played City, and they're gonna play Arsenal, so they are sandwiched away at Palace. It's quite. It's quite helpful from an Arsenal perspective, isn't it, to have Man United playing that kind of fixture? Because Man United probably, right now they're thinking, oh, we beat Arsenal. If we beat Arsenal, then, we're closing that gap. They've got to beat Palace first, don't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, it's I mean, we can hope that there's a level of fatigue that maybe creeps into our game against them, because they've played two, like a massive game obviously on Saturday, and then they're playing again a few days later, and it's an away game as well. I know that maybe doesn't really make a huge difference, but every we just have to hold on to every little kind of bit of hope that we can in terms of just those small advantages. But yeah, like you say, their focus, like they're going to have one eye on the game against us, right? And they're probably doing the double over us, beating the team at the top of the league at the moment, and also flying, like all of those things must be coming into their head. And yeah, kind of pulling themselves into a title challenge. But ultimately, they have to focus on Palace tomorrow night. So that presents a interesting challenge for them. But I mean, I don't know what you think about how the game tomorrow is going to go. Like, my hope is Palace away is always quite like Selhurst Park is always, it's just a tough, like it can be it's obviously a very like intimidating atmosphere. I know United have been there and done it, whatever. But my hope is that the fact that it's a game on TV, a night game, an evening game under the lights, and hopefully Palace are really, really up for it, and they generate a good atmosphere, which might mean that it's a really tough game for United, hopefully. But at the same time, United are doing really well at the moment. They're doing really well at the moment. They do look strong, and I wouldn't be surprised if they win that game. But yeah, man, like I think my main hope from the Palace game is maybe they pick up an injury or two, or something happens, and suspensions or whatever, and it just kind of that then has a knock-on effect into our game, and it gives us maybe a slight advantage, because I do think it's going to be extremely tough on Sunday for us.
I think so too, but I think history does play a part in games like this as well. I think the Arsenal players have so many memories. So many of those guys on the pitch have got such good memories of playing Man United and winning at home. We've done it a fair amount of times, and we're just very, very good at home. I think that it's going to be a really good game. I do agree, and I think it will be tough. But I think we're going to go out and we will play our game. I don't think we're going to do anything. I don't think we're going to set up in any way that says, we're going to try and have a plan for this player or that player. And we obviously will, like they do prepare in that way. But what I mean is, we won't sacrifice our plan of how we want to play to try and negate them. I think, we will do what we've been doing every home game this season and going hell for leather. And I think that, one of the things that I've started feeling more and more, and I felt this after the Tottenham game, is tactics are super important. Obviously they are. And we know that Arteta is incredibly good at them. But I think what Arteta has also done is he's taken a lot of players to another level. And and then if players are playing on a certain level, if they are at some point that good, it doesn't really matter about the system that they come up against. So with Saka at the moment, for example, Jamie Redknapp mentioned this in when he was sort of analysing the game afterwards, and I don't put a lot of weight in what Jamie Redknapp says as an analyst, but he just made a throwaway comment of when he's talking about how Tottenham set up, he goes, Saka's one of the best wingers in the world, so you can't do that against him. And I was like, do you know what? He probably is one of the best wingers in the world now. Probably, I never really thought of that. I've never considered him to be one of the best wingers in the world. I've sort of thought, he's this super talent who's got a really high ceiling. He could be.
Yeah,
it probably is. And I think when you're that good, when you're as good as Saka is right now, it doesn't really matter about. I think what fullback you're going to come up against. You probably find solutions. I think we've got a lot of players who are on that level. So I'm just, as much as I was feeling pessimistic about Spurs, I'm feeling quite optimistic about this one. I'll be honest, mate. I do think we're going to win. I think
the home factor is massive as well. Like you say, we've done really well against them at home in recent years, and we've talked about it so many times. Like the crowd just completely gets behind the team and does generate a seriously good atmosphere. And this whole connection, this newfound connection between the fans and the players and the fans and the club, it's tangible. You can feel it when you go to games. You can feel it when you go to these big home games, for sure. So that could play a massive, massive part. So yeah, to be honest, mate, like maybe you're going to just sort of lead into your prediction there, but like I agree. I actually think we'll win as well. Like I think that exactly what you said, like we'll come out hell for leather. We've just got so many threats going forward. It's very, very hard to defend against. Like you can see it now, even if you watch it as a neutral, which we can't do. But even if you do watch it, well, if you listen to a neutral person talk about Arsenal or a pundit talk about Arsenal, you know, you start naming the threats, and you start naming the dangerous players, or you know, and we are effective and dangerous through very different players, basically. And so you can't, you know, if you stop Saka, it's Martinelli on the other side, and then how do you prevent Erdegaard picking up the ball and doing what he does and dictating the play and making those kind of killer passes? And now he's scoring goals as well. So like there's threats from all over the pitch, and even like you think from set pieces, you know, we seem to be pretty threatening from set pieces. You know, we seem to win a lot of headers in the box, and aerially we're pretty good. So so I mean, I agree. I think the home factor, the fact that it's at the Emirates as well, our form at home has been really, really good, and they're just gonna be on it. Like it's such a massive, massive game. It's arguably, I don't want to say it's bigger than the City game that we've got coming up in a few weeks. It's obviously not, like, because City's first versus second, if it still is that come whenever that is, February 14th or 15th, whenever it is. But it feels like it's bigger because if we win, it's almost like, right, the gap between us and United then grows pretty big. Like it's not insurmountable, but it becomes like what? I don't know what it is.
Well, it depends because, you know, obviously if they beat Palace, then they win. So it could be that if they beat Palace and then lose to us, then the gap remains at 9 points, but they'll have played a game more, which is quite significant. Is, you know, 9-point gap with a game in hand is quite big.
And that's assuming they beat Palace. So, you know, it feels
exactly.
So it does feel like a bit of a, you know, kind of like how the Spurs game was in a way. It was like, if we win that, then, you know, it's very difficult for Spurs to catch us. Now, it's not impossible, but it's very, very, I mean, I don't think anyone thinks Spurs are going to catch us, but, you know, stranger things have happened in football. But no, I think it's kind of similar in that way, where I'm not saying United can't catch us if we beat them, but it makes it pretty tough. Like it does put another game ticked off and a you know, a pretty chunky gap between both teams. It feels like a real like clash of the Titans type match, and the two informed teams going at it. So yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it. But I agree. I actually think we'll come out on top on this one. So I'm feeling kind of confident.
Do you worry about any of their players in particular? Rashford's had a brilliant period recently, right? He's undeniably his stats look really good at the moment. He's scoring goals. He's basically, he seems to be Man United's attacking talisman at the moment, right? Like their big moments seem to be coming through him.
Yeah,
I think he's got a decent record against Arsenal as well. Do you have concerns about him and the way he's playing at the moment?
I mean, I've always really liked Rashford. Like I know he had that bad period last season or whenever it was, you know, like maybe a couple of seasons, and he kind of wasn't at the level that he was when he first like broke onto the scene. But he's, I mean, I think pace is, for any attacker, or let's say for any defender, pace is like one of the things that you just don't want to be facing. So obviously he offered, like, he's a pretty good finisher and he has good attacking attributes. But I think if we can, like what I said at the start, if we can almost contain the United threat on the counter, like I don't look at United and think they build up. They score goals through their build up. I haven't watched them that closely the last, you know, the wins that they've had sort of December and this month. I haven't watched it that closely or paid loads of attention to it, but they don't strike me as a team that build up play and are as progressive as we are, if that makes sense. And I feel like a lot of their goals are just from, like, maybe not necessarily counter-attacking, but just really like dynamic, kind of like getting the ball forward really quickly. And I think if we can almost try and stop that happening, which I think we have the defenders to do, and I think we have the setup to do, then I think it then allows, you know, our dangerous players to cause some damage. So yeah, of course, like, you've got to be wary of the threat, and I'm not dismissing it. I'm not saying that, you know, it's not, you know, it's not there. We just pretend like, you know, Arsenal are amazing and we don't have anything to worry about. You know, that's not the case. But at the same time, I feel like we're that good at the moment. You know, if we play as well as we've been playing, then that could prove to be what makes the difference come full time.
And it's going to be a really interesting midfield battle, isn't it? Because let's compare, right? We've gone from playing Tottenham, who were up against us with a two-man midfield where they gave one guy a debut, and Højbjerg, in my opinion, is a rubbish player. You've got those two who were against Partey and Xhaka and Odegaard, and it was just a ridiculous matchup. But against Man United, who right now, like, you could probably argue that area of the pitch is so much stronger for them than it has been in previous seasons. They're just, whatever it is, like, even if it's not just the individual quality, say, for example, Casemiro's obviously got loads of individual quality, but, players like Fred, who've been there kind of for a while before and kind of now kind of in tandem with someone like an Eriksen, for example, for whatever reason, it's working quite well and they're quite robust. And it's arguably, say, if they start with those three, that'll probably be the toughest midfield that our midfield will have faced so far this season. So, I imagine that could be quite interesting. But what we've seen with Arsenal, like you said, like the way that we set up tends to deal quite well, I think, with dynamic teams, but also the way we recycle possession is the best in the league. That's probably, I think, in my opinion, one of the best aspects of Arsenal's game at the moment is recycling the ball. Like, it's just pressure, when it's in the opponent's third, we just seem to somehow keep getting the ball over and over and over again and suffocate teams. And I think that it'll be very interesting to see, because Ten Hag's obviously an astute guy. He's obviously very perceptive and he will know that. I'll be really intrigued to see what back four he names, because he's been moving stuff around a little bit, right? Martinez hasn't been starting, and Martinez, from what I understand, that's not injury. That's not coming back from the World Cup being a bit knackered anymore. That's just like a tactical thing. He's playing Luke Shaw in central defense, which is really interesting, right? Like, but it'll be very interesting to see what he does in this game. Does he still go with that? I think that you're playing a big gamble playing against Arsenal at the moment without centre backs who really, really, really know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
So I think that will be very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So you what score do you think it's going to be?
I'm going to go with the reverse of the Old Trafford score. So I'm going to go 3-1. I think we'll concede, but I think it might be like we get a couple of goals in succession, one after another, and everything I said before. I think we can definitely win the game, 3-1.
I was going to go with 3-1 as well. But so I'm actually going to go with 3-2. I think we'll win 3. I think we'll win 3-2. But I don't think it's going to be one of those games where I think we might have nervous moments. And I think it might be a case where, like, we probably go 2-0 up or whatever, where, like, for a period of time it looks like we're comfortable, and then I think there'll be a period of the game where it'll be like squeaky bum time. I think it might be one of those kind of games, but I think we'll win. And but I do think Man United are going to beat Palace. I think so. Just because I actually don't, as much as I would really hope Palace can do something, Palace just aren't very good at the moment, and I think United will know that. Like you said, because they've got squad depth, I think they may even rotate a little bit and still be okay. So look, we'll see. I hope Palace prove me wrong. Paddy Vieira, please do us a favour.
Yeah.
But look, brilliant. Listen, let's talk about transfers, mate.
Yes.
So we've had a bit of a weird January so far, haven't we? Let's just kind of turn the clock back a little bit. So coming into the January transfer window, Arsenal are top of the league. We're flying. And I think we discussed on this podcast how right now, Arsenal, youngest team in the Premier League, playing amazing football, top of the league. We're probably such an attractive prospect to join, way more attractive than we were maybe a year ago. And we talked about the need for squad depth in specific positions. And it was very clear, very, very clear that Arsenal were really, really keen on signing Mykhailo Mudryk for a figure that kept on seemingly increasing to a point where we were, I think, all very surprised that Arsenal were willing to kind of go near any of those numbers. But what it clearly seemed to suggest was that we really wanted this bloke. He has subsequently ended up at Chelsea. I mean, I don't need to recap the whole story, but, it took everyone by surprise a little bit. And Chelsea have offered a package which allegedly was the same amount of money overall as a total package as what Arsenal's was. But the bonuses in the incentive based part of the fee seemed to be a little bit more realistic than the conditions that Arsenal were setting. So I can only imagine Arsenal were saying stuff like, well, if he wins the Ballon d'Or, we'll give you 10 million. And maybe Chelsea were saying, okay, if we win the Premier League, we'll give you 10 million. And maybe they just thought that was more achievable, whatever. Anyway, he's not an Arsenal player, Mudryk, anymore. He's not coming to Arsenal anymore. He is he's at Chelsea, which puts us in a position right now where we haven't signed anyone in January yet. So let's take a beat first. Just instead of going to broader depth and whatever, how do you feel about the Mudryk situation now? Are you disappointed? Are you relieved that we didn't spend that much money? How do you feel?
I wouldn't say I'm necessarily relieved, because I think we've been after someone, even since the summer. We've been after kind of like I say big money, but a established. Well, I don't think you can call Mudryk established necessarily, but basically someone that we knew was going to cost a fair bit of money in one of those wide attacking positions. So I wouldn't say I'm necessarily, relieved about it. I think when the news broke that there was obviously talk before that night where Chelsea actually kind of got this deal done. There was talk that Chelsea were interested. Then there was talk that they almost kind of stepped aside and were going to, he was going to join us, or looked like he was going to join us. And then all of a sudden that night, it's Chelsea delegates are in wherever it was, Turkey or wherever it was, getting a deal done, and you're getting all the tweets from the usual people. And the first time I saw it, I was just like, what the hell? Where's this come from? Pretty much it felt like it was out of the blue, and it was. I was shocked. I was shocked and annoyed in some ways, because it's this is what Chelsea can do. They have the ability to do this, which is frustrating in a way, because we've obviously put in a lot of work to get that deal done. Obviously, must have everything agreed with the player. Arteta, we're not the kind of team that or club that goes around and signs, a number. We don't do what we can't afford to do what a lot of other clubs do, and we don't do what a lot of other clubs do. We're generally pretty selective with our transfers and where we spend money, and we try to make sure that when we spend big money, we're making the right call, basically. So it just felt really frustrating, because it did feel like it was almost like weeks and weeks of work, basically groundwork that we've put in to get the deal done, and Chelsea have come in at the last minute. And obviously, just because financially they can do what they did, they were able to put together a better package, which Shakhtar accepted. I mean, I feel like there's some sort of dodginess going on with that deal. That I don't know, the donation to the Ukraine, whatever it was, everything about it. It just seems a bit dodgy, how they unveiled him, and he's now like radio silence from him compared to last few weeks. It's something's not quite right there. But look, my overall reflection is, I kind of have, I have a little bit of a feeling like it's a bit of a bullet dodged. And I don't really have any basis for feeling that, because obviously we've just not seen him play. And let's see how he does for Chelsea and how his Chelsea career turns out, or how his career turns out. But look, I'm sure he would have been fantastic for us. But at the same time, I feel like players in his position, whilst they're probably hard to necessarily, they're probably must be hard to attain and get a deal done. I feel like there's other options of similar standard, if not better. Now, I'm not going to start naming any names, but there are, in terms of attacking players, wide attacking players, I don't think it's as difficult to find one of those as it is, say, a Thomas Partey at the moment anyway. So for me, I'm kind of just hoping that the club have, moved on pretty quickly and have gone to plan B, plan C, and are looking at what those options are. And I'm sure they would have identified a list. I can't imagine they've just put all their eggs in this Mudryk basket. Yeah. And so hopefully they're working on something. And obviously, look, names are being linked, and and this is when it gets a bit ridiculous, because we're probably going to start being linked to everyone. Yeah. And I've no idea who it might be if we do get someone in January. But yeah, I'm just hoping that that's how the club, it's business at the end of the day, and the club just needs to move on and identify someone else, or go for the next target. And I'm pretty much over it now, man. I'm over that. It would have been lovely if he had come, and potentially let's see what impact he would have had for the rest of the season. Young, exciting player, but I feel like there's loads of young, exciting players across Europe that we could potentially go for. I'm kind of over it now.
Were you surprised that we were willing to spend so much money on that type of player? And so, as you mentioned, there's lots of sort of it's probably easier to find a winger than it is a Thomas Partey. But if you look at, say, all of our positions and where we've got squad depth, Mudryk is a left winger, right? It seems like whenever I've seen clips of him playing, he starts on the left, so he's predominantly a left-sided forward. And in that area of the pitch, that's where we've got Martinelli and Emile Smith-Rowe, who are both players that I think Arsenal really, really are banking on. They are big footballers for Arsenal. Whereas, there are other areas of the pitch where we don't necessarily have that kind of depth. Did that surprise you? Or do you think that maybe, Arteta was planning on perhaps using him in a different way, maybe, maybe was planning on trying to convert him into a more of a striker or a right-sided player, or, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's hard to say if we had any other plans for him. Like you say, everything in terms of all of the clips I saw of him, he seemed to be, going, attacking down that left-hand side. But I think, potentially there was maybe a plan to, I don't know if it's converting him to the other side or using him in another position. But I think if you look at the Man City model, and I think you have to look at the Man City model when you think who our manager is. Like a lot of those players, maybe Haaland aside, a number of those players can operate in different positions, and I think that's just that's modern football to a certain extent. I think that's if you're going to pick a team to almost copy in terms of a successful team who've done it for the last kind of 6 or 7 years, whatever, then Man City's the team to do that, and the Pep model is the model to copy. So quite possibly, but I think also, if you think about hopefully where we're going to be come August, or where we're going to become next season, that should be Champions League football, right? And that should be it would be a hell of a lot more games, and a lot more games at a much higher standard. And as a result, you have to have like a stronger squad. So if that's who the club feel like is the player to bring in that position, or as an attacking player, then I'm all for it. That's fine. Like, I've got no kind of, I'm not one of these fans that's going to be like, oh, but what's going to happen to Martinelli?
Yeah.
What's going to happen to Smith-Rowe? Like, like you say, if we value the players that we have and they have a future, then let the manager kind of work that out. But you need a squad of, ideally 2 world-class players for every position, but or as close to that as you can get to compete in like the bigger competitions and to be trying to maybe win the league next season. So I'm completely cool with that, to be honest.
If you look at the wingers that we've now been linked with since since this Mudryk deal has fallen through, you've got today Sky Sports were reporting that Moussa Diaby from Leverkusen has been sounded out by Arsenal. 23 years old, left winger again, predominantly left-sided player. He's one, and Ferran Torres is another one who has had some links. He's obviously at Barcelona, and Barcelona have got their money problems. He's also a left winger. And then on the other side of the pitch, a couple of players that we've been linked with again is Rafinha, who we know Arsenal were interested in. Edu even admitted that he tried to go for him, so that's not just a rumor. He admitted it. He's predominantly a right-sided winger, and we've also been linked today with a winger from Orlando City called Facundo. I think that's how you pronounce his first name, Facundo Torres, who played for Orlando, played against us in pre-season when we were in America, and scored against us. And he's a right-sided winger, left-footed right-sided winger, same as Rafinha in that way. So it feels like the players that we've been linked, well, they're wingers, so that's a start.
Yeah.
But they're not isolated to kind of having a career predominantly spent on either end. It seems like we're interested in both those types of players. Out of those players that I've just described, which to you sounds like it could be right, and which perhaps sound to you like they're does any of them sound like a player that you'd want at Arsenal?
So I don't know anything about Diaby, in all honesty. It was Diaby, right? Don't even know his name.
Yeah.
Torres, I can't remember like that game that we played preseason. I honestly can't remember it. So going on what I've actually seen, or players I've actually seen, I think Rafinha is the one for me, because he was electric for Leeds. Like, he was a really, really exciting player to watch. He's one of those players that he's kind of similar to Saka in the sense that he gets the crowd, he gets the crowd on their feet. And he had output, he had goals, he had assists. And yeah, I would love to see Rafinha in an Arsenal shirt. He would just be a player that would really excite me. Ferran Torres is an interesting one because didn't he play? He played as a striker for City, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
And so that's he can play striker. I don't know where he's been playing for Barcelona or if he's been playing for Barcelona. But then, like, I don't know. I have slight concerns because, like, he was itching to get out of City for whatever. I don't know if it's because Barcelona wanted him or if he was like homesick or there was something, and I don't know that his motivations for coming back to the Premier League. I'm not sure if that's I don't know. But in terms of, I remember seeing him a few times for City and he looked like a quality player and, we could definitely use, I mean, it's not necessarily a case of we need another striker, but at the same time we do, because if something happens to Eddie this season, then what do we do? Because let's assume Jesus isn't back till who knows when, April, May. So maybe like a loan deal for Torres might be a bit of a sort of short-term solution. But look, for me, man, like if the one obvious one that just sticks out, I don't know if you know who I'm going to say, but like Wilfried Zaha.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I mean, we had this conversation a year ago, I think. And I think we went to watch Arsenal play at home on deadline day, I think, or the day before deadline day, something like that, or maybe a couple of days before. And we were like, we didn't sign anyone. And we were like, we need to sign someone. We need to sign a couple of players because we're going to lose, what's going to happen with top four. And we didn't sign anyone. And I think a few of us, I definitely thought Zaha, even though there weren't really any links, it seemed like an obvious move. And I think I'm kind of hoping that if it comes to like the last few days of the window and we haven't signed anyone in that it's like as an attacker, I'm just hoping that he's someone that we try and get a deal done for, because there's just so many reasons for there's so many reasons why it makes sense. And yeah, I would love, again, I mean, he's an Arsenal fan. I understand. I would love to see him play for Arsenal. I think, again, he's just a player that every time he gets the ball, he just looks so dangerous, and he's got a bit of a point to prove, I feel like, after his failed Man United move. And the other obvious one is maybe Trossard, because I think, I don't know what's kind of, is it De Zerbi? Is that the right name? Is the manager?
Yeah.
Made some comments today saying, this is what happened, but ultimately, if he sorts his attitude out, he can come back to training and all's good. And if he apologizes, so who knows what's going to happen, but it looks like he's trying to force a move out. And again, I'm just hopeful that, because it must be really hard to get a like 60, 70, 80 million pound deal done in January. Like it's like when you're Arsenal, when it's like, we're not Chelsea where we can just gazump the team that are going for him. And we're going to have to structure it in a way that works for us and all the rest of it. And I just think if we can't get that sort of deal done in the next couple of weeks, then just have a backup plan where it's like, the target's attainable. He's maybe not that expensive.
Yeah.
But he's going to add a level of quality and depth and backup to the squad. And he could have an impact between now and the end of the season. Because look, man, everyone's saying it. If we don't sign anyone between now and in this window, like, can't see us not getting to the end of the season and like we're going to have regret that we did what we did last January as well.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, just before we get onto that bit more generally on the players that you just mentioned, right? So Zaha, like, I think the problem is there, like, I think he's 30 years old. So if we do kind of sign him, however cheap that might be, it's a sunk cost then, right? So we're not going to end up getting kind of any money for him before. And I don't think that's a be all and end all. Don't get me wrong. But I do recall David Ornstein reporting a little while ago that Zaha was not going to leave in January, and it was kind of almost he had made his mind up that he was going to try and help Palace for the rest of the season and try and go on a free, at the end of the season. Right. And I imagine, actually, let's just say even if that wasn't the case, Palace are probably looking at it right now and are probably a little bit worried about the prospect of relegation. Not that because it doesn't take that much for them to get dragged down there properly. Some of the teams there at the moment, you might not expect to be there by the end of the season. West Ham are joint bottom on points, right? But you don't. I think they'll probably end up being safe. So I wonder if Palace are a little bit worried about that, and as a result, getting rid of Zaha, is probably not the best idea for them. I'm not sure how much Arsenal or anyone would be willing to pay in January anyway. But I do agree that, at the end of the day, he's obviously someone who'd come in and you could probably have impact immediately. He knows the league inside out, and, he probably has a chip on his shoulder from failing at United, and this would be his last big hurrah. Trossard, I think, is a really interesting one, because I think he's a different type of winger as well. Like, from what I have seen about Trossard, he's not a, incredibly pacey, gets right to the byline and is kind of, doing tricks and crossing it. I think it feels like someone who kind of comes in centrally a little bit more and finds himself in the box quite often. And I do like him. He's clearly, I think, seems a really talented guy. And it sounds like, again, David Ornstein reported, I think today or yesterday, that Spurs had a £12 million kind of verbal bid rejected for him. So I don't know how much Brighton are holding out for. But look, I agree that we do need depth. The thing is, if we didn't buy any wingers this January, personally, I don't think that's as big a problem as if we don't sign any central midfielders. And I know that we can talk about maybe the fact that we might be targeting a big name in the summer. But I think even if we get a big name in the summer, I think we need another body in central midfield, because the drop off is just too big from what we currently have to, currently start with to the bench. I don't think that, we've discussed it before. I don't want to go over it again, but it feels like if Partey is injured, we have to change our system. We don't have a replacement to do the things that he does. Maybe you can't even find someone else out there for a decent price who can be backup, but it does feel like the drop off is massive. But I haven't heard us being linked with any central midfielders this window, because Danilo was one who from Palmeiras, who is, kind of talked about before. He's just gone to Nottingham Forest. So I don't know. I haven't heard anything. Well, what do you think about that central midfield situation?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you're right. It does feel like getting another attack, or getting an attacking player in would be lovely, but not a necessity. And if you assume that Saka and Martinelli stay fit for the rest of the season, then that doesn't become, that is not a priority position. But yeah, I agree. Completely, the drop off when Partey is out of the team is massive, and this is the problem, mate. You can't buy a Partey replacement. Well, you can, but like you say, it's probably a big name. It's probably big money. And I know we're going to come on to that. So then you are looking at another squad option, and it shouldn't be that hard to do. So I just can't imagine, if Danilo was available, which obviously he was, because he's gone to Forest, then if that was a player that we wanted, for depth, for the future as well, then he's a player that we probably would have gone and got. So I'm not sure what changed on that front, but maybe it's just a case of they are going to go for someone big in the summer, and they're going to wait until then. And possibly we're just going to go with what we have in central midfield, which is going to be a risk. It's a massive risk. But then, mate, I think you can look at, there's a couple of it. I think the only area that we're really well stacked in is probably at fullback. Not well stacked, but pretty well stacked, right? Even when you think about centre back, the next centre back to come in, I know we can move players around, and Tommy Ash can play centre back and Ben White, and okay, fine, but a couple of
left-footed centre back, we don't.
No, we don't. And you don't really, not I love Rob Holding, I love him, but you don't really want Rob Holding starting.
The drop off is massive. The drop off between what we have now in central defence to Rob Holding is the same as the drop off between Partey to Elneny.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've said this before. I've said this before. We've said this before, that you can probably cope for a few games without Partey, but if it's anything like an extended period of time, then it's a bit of it is a worry. So you're right. We're not being linked with anyone. So I think at the moment it's just more hope. We're just hoping. I'm hoping that there's a deal that we're trying to get done, but I can't see it being even if we get someone in, it's probably going to be I'm naming a random, or not random name. I'm naming a name like Douglas Luiz. It's a mid-table type player that it's a big move for them. It's not massive money, and it's a squad bolster type option as opposed to who we're going to come on to, like a Declan Rice. Because I can't see us doing that in January, to be honest.
Like a Declan Rice, so you say. So let's talk about Declan Rice. That's the rumor that seems to be kind of spreading over the last couple of days. A lot of the papers have kind of gone with that story. In fairness, like a few weeks ago, I think there was sort of similar stuff that was trickling around about, Arsenal might be one of those clubs that are interested in Rice. And the story that a few papers have run with today is that the Arsenal really, really want Rice. And there's a couple of papers who have kind of gone with a suggestion that Arsenal are front runners for Declan Rice and that he does want to come. Now, it's interesting. The timing of this is quite interesting. Part of me doesn't know whether this is Arsenal kind of trying to leak this to make Arsenal fans feel better about the fact that we just missed out on Mudryk. Like there is some kind of longer term plan. I don't know. But it did remind me of something, which was, do you remember back in October when Ian Wright was on one of these TV shows? I can't remember which one. Do you know what I'm going to say? And Ian Wright basically said in a comment, he said, he said words to the effect of, there are players who are waiting to see if Arsenal finish in the top four, and if they do, then they want to come to Arsenal. Basically, he said words to that effect. So they're waiting to see if Arsenal in the top four, and he wouldn't say who, and he was just, But the fact that it's Ian Wright makes me think that it's probably an English player, and it's and I think if you look at all the players that it could then possibly be, and the fact that he did sound quite excited about it, Declan Rice would seem like the most obvious one. And it is a bit, the narrative that had been going on for a while was that Declan Rice is destined for Chelsea because he's former Chelsea, unfinished business. That's what the narrative was anyway. Mason Mount is his best mate. Chelsea need to do a complete overhaul of their central midfield. That's what it sounded like. It was just a kind of, not almost a done deal, because that Chelsea are going to come up with the money. Like the money's not going to be an issue. They'll find it.
Yeah.
But now everyone's kind of wondering whether that's the case, right? I mean, so what do you think about the story? About, firstly, what do you think of Declan Rice? Do you want him to come to Arsenal? And what do you think about the validity of this story?
So what do I think of Declan Rice? So I think I remember me, you, and Aaron were in the pub after we lost. I don't know if you remember this. We were in the pub after we lost at home. It might have been a Liverpool game. It was either last season or maybe the season before. It must have been last season. It was a while ago though, and we were talking about all sorts hypotheticals. And I was like, if there's any chance that we can go and get Declan Rice, like even if it costs us 100 million. I think he is the guy that transformed. And this is also bearing in mind where Partey was kind of not the Partey that we're seeing today. And I was like, he's the guy. He is the guy. This is probably kind of before Bellingham. Obviously, he's been good for the last couple of years, but he really burst onto the scene like in the World Cup and stuff. And I was sure of it. And like I've basically since then, or in the last couple of years, I've absolutely rated Declan Rice. Like I feel like as a player, I was going to start comparing him to like Steven Gerrard and all of that. I'm not going to do that. But basically, he's like for West Ham, he seems to have this quite defensive role. Like he's basically a defensive midfielder and the leader of the team. But if you actually watch him, when he has the opportunity to go forward and when he has the opportunity to play box to box, he's actually really, really, he's very, very good on the ball. He can score goals. He can dictate play. And just overall in terms of like how I basically do very much rate him as a quality player. And I think there's so many reasons why signing Declan Rice makes sense. Obviously it'd be a huge amount of money, but like, he's an English guy. He's been touted as potentially a future England captain. I mean, he's a West Ham captain, potentially a future England captain. Like he's that sort of player where he's going to join. If he were to join Arsenal, he's like a natural leader. He's just that sort of player. So he just becomes a leader within the team. He's the right age profile. Like I say, I think that he can play as a defensive midfielder. So he could potentially be an option instead of Partey's successor, but I think he can also probably play where Granit Xhaka is playing at the moment in a more advanced role. And so, I think there's just a lot of reasons why it makes sense. And I genuinely hope that yeah, like these links are not the club leaking anything, or it's not just agent talk or whatever it might be. Like, I genuinely hope that he's either we've spoken to him, or some, like, basically we're confident that we could potentially, like, we've done the due diligence, that we know that he wants to come to us, and now it's just a case of maybe convincing West Ham and putting the money down on the table. Because I think mate, like, he could arguably be a big part of our central midfield for the next, like, 5, 6, 7 years. Like, and I don't exaggerate when I really, really do rate him. So yeah, man, like, I really hope it's a deal that is it's not a bullshit deal. Basically, I really hope that it's we're genuinely interested in him, and and I think the other thing is, as well, is when you look across the other teams that he's been linked with previously. So Chelsea's, like you said, the obvious one. And you made a very good point. Chelsea need to rebuild their central midfield, but, like, who the hell knows who Chelsea? Like, you just don't know with who Chelsea want to buy, or who they're planning to buy, or do they even have a plan? And they're spending so much money on, like, their attackers, basically, and they've bought, like, expensive defenders as well. When you think of, like, Cucurella and stuff, like, are they? I don't know. Like, I don't know the finances, but can they put the money down? That sort of money, you're talking close to probably 100 million, or 80, 90, 100 million. Can they even, like, I don't want to say afford him, but you know what I mean, right? Like, they're spending money on everyone. So that's a concern. And then Chelsea, like, if what you're saying about the point you made about Ian Wright, yeah, look, okay, let's just have a bit of fun and say, yeah, he's definitely talking about Declan Rice. Then Chelsea probably, I don't know, are they going to get in the top 4 next season for this season? Doesn't look like it at the moment. So if no Champions League football next season, then does he really want to go to Chelsea? Maybe not, if that's what he's holding out for. Liverpool, similarly, and Liverpool don't really have that sort of money, from what I understand, and they're potentially going to get bought out soon. United have just bought Casemiro. They're going through they're potentially going to be bought soon. If he goes to City, like, okay, City can obviously pay him well, and that's fine, but is he going to start for City, like, ahead of Rodri and Calvin Phillips? And I think Gundogan might be leaving this season, but like, he's probably going to become a squad player at City. Does he really want that? He's a London boy. So I just think there's loads of reasons why it makes sense for him and for us. So yeah, man, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it's not nonsense rumors, and if it happens, I will be over the moon with that signing.
I'll be over the moon too. I do think it's a bit of a funny one, though, right? Like, because, okay, what the Mudryk deal has kind of proved to me, and also, that Chelsea are attracting a number of other players, is that, okay, one, money does talk. Okay, it talks, but two, I think players are willing, with the Premier League and with the fact that you've got so many clubs who are actually very good and powerful, etc. I think that if you sell a project, if one of these top clubs sells a project, I'm not sure players mind too much that they're not going to be in the Champions League next year, if they're convinced of the fact that they are investing lots of money and they've got the ambitions to kind of get back where they need to be. So in that respect, I'm not sure the fact that Chelsea aren't going to be in the Champions League next season will be, like, one of the main factors, I think, behind Rice's decision. I think that if they sell him the project, then that, like they did with allegedly Mudryk, and clearly with some of the other players, and Kunku, I imagine, they sold this project. Maybe that's okay. The other thing that I think that is in Chelsea's side, if Chelsea were to go for Declan Rice, is it is so obvious, right? They sign him and he basically goes straight in the team. He could probably end up being captain very shortly. I wouldn't be surprised if he's on Chelsea to be captain. With Arsenal, it's almost like, how well we're playing at the moment. It creates a bit of a funny thing, doesn't it? Because I know, like you said before, I don't like to think as well about the fact that, we've got these players in this position, like, what do we need this other player for? But I think central midfield can be a little bit different in that it's a bit like central defense in that way. I think, if you get an established pairing, that tends to be the one that you go with. You tend not to, like, rotate so much if you've got an obvious pairing that's doing well. And because Arsenal are having this season at the moment, if Partey stays fit, like, the whole season and carries on playing the way that he's doing, then it's quite difficult, isn't it? Because if you're Declan Rice, then you're coming in and you're looking at Arsenal and going, well, I'm probably not going to beat, if everyone's fit right now on day one, I'm probably not going to beat Partey out the team in the DM role. So it will be about whether Arsenal think that, maybe, I can get play the Xhaka role, in which case, is that going to happen? I'm not sure. And then, do I wait to transition to take the reins off Partey and therefore play a more of a like rotational role this season? I would hope actually that the answer to that would be yes, because again, it's a longer term project and you think Arsenal are going in a really good direction and he could kind of, like you say, be a big part for the next 10 years. But I do think there's lots of there's lots of these kind of pros and cons depending on kind of, which way you look at it. Your Man United point as an example, right? Casemiro is the same age as Partey. They're both 30. So Man United could probably argue the same thing and say to him, listen, you can be our guy for like God knows how many years. So they could probably have the same argument. I would love him, and I think that there's clearly some smoke there. I think whether it's genuine or not, I imagine that he's given some indication that he'd be willing to, come to Arsenal. Yeah. The one thing that I didn't know that I've found out today, if Sky are actually telling the truth, is that West Ham have a year extension option.
I heard this as well. Yeah.
So I thought that, fine, like he's got 1.5 years otherwise. But they could extend it to 2.5 years.
2.5. Okay, right, yeah. But I think, mate, like he's been pretty. It's not loyal. He's obviously not been loyal as such, but I think he's been pretty patient with West Ham. Like, obviously, he's probably wanted to leave, if last summer, if not the summer before that. And I think because he's kind of come through at West Ham since leaving Chelsea, and he's probably got a bit of a affinity to the club. And he sort of said to them, probably what Harry Kane said a few seasons ago. Yeah, I'll give you another year, but then I want to go. And I mean, look, it feels like West Ham would be absolute arseholes to activate that extension because just to preserve his value. So I can see him leaving this summer. It feels like, especially with how badly West Ham are doing, like they don't. If they at least if they were progressing, then they could say, look, we're in Europe this season. Stay another season. Let's see how we do. Let's try and win a trophy, whatever. But they're going backwards, right? They're probably going to change their manager soon. So. I think they'll just look to cash in on him at his peak value. So, yeah, I heard that as well, but I'd be surprised if they activate that. I mean, if you're still talking 70 million also when he's got a year left, that's a shitload of money.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, look, it's one of these things that it's obviously an interesting news story because it's popped up now, but ultimately it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything until the summer anyway, right? So there's going to be a hell of a lot of things for us to talk about before then. But I think that it would also be, if that is a plan, if we think that's a deal to be done, it would also indicate, I think, the direction of travel where Arteta and Edu are going, where I think they have their strategic targets and they're not going to do anything kind of short term just to just to panic buy in that way. I think therefore, if they think that Declan Rice is the one they want, or if they've got an option of him and someone else, will say in the summer, then I don't necessarily think that they're going to get a plan C or a D in January, because they want to try and win the league. But I do hope there's going to be some players, and I think we need a central midfielder, and I think it would be nice to have another player who can play across the top. And for anything, just competition and places, keep it fresh, and just kind of have that extra boost of energy because fixtures are going to come in quickly. A left side of centre back, I think, is also important. But yeah, let's see who we get linked with, mate. Let's see. Cool. All right, listen, great chat. I mean, look. Huge game, back to topic one, huge game on the weekend and cannot wait. Sunday, I kind of wish it was a Saturday because, you can probably get even merrier.
If we win as well. Yeah,
exactly. But it is what it is. And let's just, I'm sure all Arsenal fans everywhere are also going to have a big eye on the game tomorrow, Palace and Man United. So let's see how that goes. Patrick Vieira, please do us a favor, my legend. It would be so helpful, I think. So Myz, any final words before we close?
Not really, man. I'm still kind of buzzing off Sunday that just gone, and another massive game, like you say, coming up on Sunday. So I'm looking forward to that. It's the first time that the four of us, as in including Aaron and Nero, will be going to a game together for a while. I think I can't remember the last one.
That's true.
It's been a few months, so that's going to be nice. Check out Aaron as tan as well. That'll be fun. Looking forward to Sunday, man. Just it's going to be massive. So yeah, let's fingers crossed we get a good result.
Absolutely. Listen, everyone, thank you for joining us. Please like, share, subscribe to our podcast. Thank you for the support and keep enjoying Arsenal, and really hope that, the next time we record, we're reflecting on a win against Man United, and we'll be reflecting on hopefully still being at the very least 9 points ahead of them. And then hopefully we can take every game as it comes and figure out who's the bigger threat to us, City and Man United. And look, hopefully we keep this fight for as long as we can, man. Like, this title race is genuine. It's a thing. We're in it. We might not do it, but we're in it and it's fun. So, let's just enjoy it while it lasts. Cool.
Nice one, mate.
Everyone, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.